me a great pleasure to welcome you all to the 16th edition of India Digital Summit, Supercharging Startups, organized by the Internet Mobile Association of India. The summit is supported by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, and Niti Aayog. I'm your host for the session, Manmeet from my team. Welcome to the Fireside Chat on the role and potential of sports technology in transforming the sports ecosystem in India. We would like to thank our digital financial management partner, EaseBus, conversational messaging partner, GupShop, session partner, GoQuick, gold partners, Manorama Online, Blink Digital, and Yellow.ai, and silver partner, ShareChat. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Vivan Sharan, partner Koan Advisory, who will be moderating today's discussion, and Harsh Jain, co-founder and CEO, Dream 11 and Dream Sports. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address the selected few at the end of the session. Over to you, Mr. Sharan.
Thank you very much to IMAI and the sponsors for doing this. I'm very, very excited about this session in particular. Sports technology is really the flavor of the season. The global sports market is touching half a trillion now, and a large share of that will soon be driven by technology. As always, has taken the lead. North America is the largest region in the global sports market, which accounts for about a third of it. But Asia Pacific is not too far behind. It's about, again, a third, just behind the North American market. And it's clear, Harsh, uh, as someone who is so deeply involved in all aspects of the market, that COVID has really upended the way we all think about the growth of the market, how fast things are changing, whatever little inertia perhaps there was within large companies, even states, to adopt sports technology. I think all of that has been shed. But in your view, what is the real sort of what are the key changes that have happened as a result of COVID beyond the accelerated adoption? Are there any other patterns that you see that have emerged over the last 2 years that really portend to the future? And this will be a future gazing discussion, blue skies thinking, and all of that. So I want to press you on a little bit of that.
Sure, Vivan. Thanks for having me here. I think in the last couple of years, we've seen that life must go on, right? Sports must continue. Even if sports stadiums cannot be full of fans, we must still have the best experience on TV, on digital, on devices at home, right? And I think there's been that prioritization shift, right? From having an in-person, best-in-class experience, which is also digitally, broadcasted or on broadcast on TV, to the broadcast becoming the prime focus. And so, in terms of making sure that the broadcast is not just the broadcast, but overlay statistics, teams and players and leagues worldwide are looking at IoT in terms of equipment now speaking to us, right? Can the bat say if the ball has edged it, right? Can the crease light up like the bails in IPL? Can the crease light up if the batsman crosses it when the stumps are hit? We've seen the goal line technology on EPL change things dramatically. We've seen offsides becoming much like, well, debated, but more calculated, right? In the US, for example, American football has always had this, right? American football has had those 10-yard lines where you can actually see if a team has crossed it or not.
Right.
But it's not there on the field. It's only there when you're watching digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think IoT and then finally AR VR is going to be a big part going forward because of the fact that now sports wants to give you that immersive experience, that
So,
augmented reality and virtual reality. By augmenting the reality, the
mm,
people in the stadium can have a totally different experience with digital, but more importantly, virtual reality will allow you to watch it at home. Like 100 million people tomorrow can wear an Oculus, or whatever it is later on, sit next to Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma and watch the match from the bench of the Indian cricket team.
right.
That's going to be a game changer.
So before we get to sort of the mass market commercial game changers that will affect all of us, the immersion seems to be the name of the game, and this also applies in a sense to the personal environment. all of us are now sort of experimenting tentatively or very actively with different forms of sports tech. There's something that was displayed at the latest CES in Vegas, which really caught my eye, which is an immersive rowing experience. So we've gone beyond the cycling to
Yeah,
rowing, and it's an integration not just of data analytics but also of AR VR, because you sort of put on a headset and you're really
right.
in a pond and rowing away.
In there,
So
right?
this is
Like,
right in there, and that's something that will certainly motivate me, even if it's for a few months. And so, as someone who uh, you know experiments with sports tech yourself, I mean, what are some of the more uh, uh, exciting sports technologies as far as your personal experience is concerned?
um, so you remember Google Glass, right?
Yeah, of course.
It was too early for its time, and now they're launching better versions of it. I was one of the first early adopters of that when I was in New York. That was
Right.
amazing, right? Like you could um, blink your eyes twice to take a photo,
Yeah.
tap it once to start taking a video,
Hmm.
and you could have augmented reality while you're looking at something. Like, for example, imagine walking to a conference and people's names popping up over their heads. I'm
Yeah.
very bad at names, right? Remembering people's names. So that's amazing. But I think I'm still waiting for the next version of Google Glass. I think Facebook's also working on something now. So I'm waiting
Yeah.
for that to come out on a daily basis. I think it's my Apple Watch that
Hmm.
that's really cool in terms of fitness and health and tracking. And I tried Aura, the ring,
Yeah.
which was cool, but I found it clunky on my finger. And so now I'm trying to get my hands on a Whoop device.
Yeah. And there's a debate now globally about why companies aren't rushing to acquire Whoop, because apparently their data analytics are just fantastic, and they have some work to do on their hardware front, but unbeatable data analytics. Just again on a slightly silly note, do you also use sleep tech uh, on your Apple Watch, or are you still sort of resisting full adoption?
No, so like Aura, you wear it. I don't wear my Apple Watch when I'm sleeping, also because the battery doesn't last for 24
Right.
hours.
Yeah.
I charge it in the night, but Aura ring I used to wear while sleeping, and it gives you your entire deep sleep, light sleep, all of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes though, I feel like it's a little too much data. You know what I mean? Sometimes you wake up feeling fresh and you look at the data and you're like, oh, I actually had a really bad night of sleep.
Well, I mean, Harsh, that really goes to the heart of again a big question. What is the purpose of all of this data collection? I mean, there
Yeah.
is a big debate here, even in the sports tech community. Are we collecting too much data, or what is your view on it?
I think we're in that phase of actually creating data, right? Like earlier, you never knew deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, all this stuff, right? So the start is always going to be everything. And
Mm.
then you actually come down and whittle it down to, okay, what do you really need, right?
Yeah.
It's like our user data. For years, large tech companies said allow data, and you
Mm.
allowed everything, right?
Yeah.
And then when you allowed everything over years now they can only ask you, hey, do you want to share your location data, or do you want to share access to your Facebook account, or do you
Mm.
want to allow us to post on your behalf? Each one has become different, right?
Yeah.
So I think today sports is still in that zone of like, let's get data, right?
Cast
So
the
it's going
net
to be
wide.
easy, right? And then we'll get to, okay, what data do we really need?
Yeah. So, data is really also, I guess, at the heart of your story over the last
Absolutely.
12 years. And, I remember seeing some of your early talks when you described your quest for sports data so eloquently and wanting to become a sports data major. And I think you've achieved that. But even as you have, I think there's a lot
Yeah,
of
man.
confusion. As someone from the public policy space, I need to ask a very fundamental question as far as one of your key um, company activities is concerned, which is fantasy sports. What is fantasy sports? What is it not? And how does it benefit the sports tech and the sports ecosystem more generally? Three questions that are interconnected.
Sure. So I think, what is fantasy sports? It's when you create a team virtually of real life players, but they don't give you points based on a simulation. They only score points based on their real life performance in a real match that's upcoming. And then you compete with others to showcase your knowledge and say that, you know what, I actually know sports better than you, because before today's match, I was able to pick a team that scored more points than your team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of confusion on like fantasy sports and gaming. There's no actual gaming in fantasy sports, right? You pick a team and then you're done. There's
That
no,
it's a team selection
it's a
activity.
team selection activity, right? It is still a game of skill, but there's no virtual gaming, there's no simulation.
There's
And
no gameplay.
therefore, correct, and therefore no addiction, and therefore it's also not available 24/7, right? If there's no sports matches going on, fantasy sports is not available.
Which,
So
by the way, as a segue for a brief minute, how does COVID impact your business directly? Because I assume
did
some
completely.
of some of the matches will not happen.
Absolutely. Like even Big Bash is going on right now. A couple of matches have been abandoned due to COVID. There was a couple of India series here and there that have been moved around, changed, or abandoned because of COVID. The South Africa series right now has been revised, right? The T20s were knocked out. So there's a lot of impact on fantasy sports because it relies on real sports.
Right.
Gaming, on the other hand, is kind of opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Gaming boomed during COVID because everyone was sitting at home and virtual and simulation, and you can play anytime.
Right.
So fantasy sports is not gaming, but it is a game of skill, just the way cricket or football is a game, right? And I think it's also important to understand the legality, right? The Supreme Court has, for once and for all, said that the format offered by Dream 11 and approved by basically the Federation of Indian Fantasy Sports, which is the self-regulatory body for fantasy sports in India, that charter is approved, and this case has reached finality. It is no longer res integra. And so this case cannot be discussed again and again about the legality. What's also happening is that people are broadly, mischievously using that and launching formats akin to gambling, in my opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And saying, oh, this is also fantasy cricket. And so we are actually hoping that we are working with the government to be a little stricter on exactly what is allowed, what is not allowed by the court, to regulate this sector and to enforce the same, right?
So let me turn that around. I mean, there's one aspect which is clearly ugly, the underbelly of
That's right.
perhaps any form of real money gaming or any sort of game that involves money and so on in India. There are so many offshore guys and fly-by-night people. You just don't know. Every third website you go to, there's an ad of an entity that may not have even a officer in India, let alone an office.
That's right.
Taking a step back from that, that's one aspect of it. But then, if from a public policy standpoint, there's also the other question: is there actually any value or benefit to fantasy sports? Because I'll just draw an analog very quickly. This question is asked a lot in, say, the crypto market arena. The RBI asked this question, for instance, behind closed doors. That look, okay, there are financial stability concerns, etc., etc. But more than that, we don't even see the value of this ecosystem.
Sure,
So
sure.
can you speak to that in the
Yeah,
fantasy sports
absolutely.
case, obviously?
Look, there are 120 million people, 12 crore people playing fantasy sports on Dream 11, right? Out of which 85% of them, over 80% of them, have never ever played for money. They only
Right.
play for free.
Hmm.
So this isn't a game about winning or losing money, right? Like almost 100 million people have never played for money on our platform. So
Hmm.
the whole idea is that these people play because it helps them engage with the sport that they love. For the last like 40 years, sports has evolved from like listening on the radio to watching on the TV, and that's it. For the
Right.
last like 30 years, we've just watched on the TV. Nothing else has changed.
Hmm. Well, you
This,
had some debates around stump mics and cameras and stuff,
yeah,
but
but
but, but
those are just
very, very nominal stuff at the
yeah,
best. Yeah.
gimmicky stuff which makes it fun. but
Yeah.
you're still watching on TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
AR, VR, for example, can be a systemic change, but fantasy sports allows you to actively engage with that sport, to be an active participant,
Yeah.
to compete with your friends and colleagues and family. And so what happens is that with fantasy sports, we've seen a drastic increase in the number of Indians participating in tier 2 and 3 cricket and sports outside of cricket. Kabaddi, basketball, hockey, football, handball, volleyball, all of this. We offer fantasy sports for it all. And what that helps in doing is that because you have a chance to make
Mm-hmm.
your team and compete with people, you end up watching matches that you wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
You end up watching parts of matches that you wouldn't otherwise. For example, this time last at the India World Cup, right? I'll bring up a very sad memory,
Mm-hmm.
but the India-Pakistan match.
Right.
Now, two-thirds of the way, two-thirds into the match, most of India would have switched off their TV. They तो
Correct.
खत्म हो गया, right? Like this is over. The fantasy sports user will watch to the last ball because even the last ball's activity changes his or her rank on the leaderboard.
So you're saying that it's not correlated to a team's performance, essentially.
So
And
one is you have you have your team that you want to win,
mm-hmm.
but then here on a personal side, you want specific players to do well, right?
Right.
Then your fantasy team does well, because of which you can either you get bragging rights or you can win money depending on how you've played. And it changes the engagement completely. We've seen, there was a report that said that fantasy sports users, sports fans that start playing fantasy sports start watching up to 60% more sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a, drastic shift in sports engagement and viewership because of fantasy sports. Finally, the fantasy sports industry on the commercial side, because it's able to have this entire user base and monetize them, is
Mm-hmm.
able to give back to the sports ecosystem. I think this last year, the fantasy sports industry, which consists of over 200 companies in India,
Wow.
has now contributed about 3,000 crores in media rights, in advertising on media properties,
Yeah.
in sponsoring teams, leagues, players, and spending money on every single sports event whatsoever, right?
Mm.
Along with that, Dream 11, I can say at least, has a Dream Sports Foundation where we also support about 6,000 athletes in India today.
Right.
And so there's also that CSR part, right? So I think fantasy sports is showing that it can really become one of the largest contributors in terms of engagement, viewership, and commercialization
So
for
that's a very
sports.
interesting business responsibility case, which is, I think, closely correlated to your ecosystem needs. I mean, you don't exist without the ecosystem,
Absolutely.
and therefore you need to invest in it. But is this also the sort of investment thesis that informs what you do at Dream Capital? You know, that technology for technology's sake will not create change,
That's right.
especially for an emerging, developing country like India, where sports technology will really need to show the ability to unlock value while sort of enhancing access for fans and opportunities for sports persons. So is it, I mean, how do you see this sort of a cycle play out between, say the money that is invested in your company and how it's sort of rooted back into the ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So what we've done is we've started an arm of Dream Sports called Dream Capital, like you said, and we put in $250 million to reinvest back into the sports ecosystem. And so we've incubated Fan Code, which does multi-sports content and sports commerce, both of which are missing in India, right? You have a couple of large cricket properties in India, but
Hmm.
where's that one large multi-sport property which personalizes my sports content according to what I like, right? So, for
Right.
example, I like Manchester United in EPL. I like the Indian cricket team. I like Mumbai Indians,
Hmm.
and I have a interest in kabaddi. I like Pink Panthers or whatever it is, right?
Mm.
And so there has to be a way to personalize sports across sports, not just cricket.
Right.
Along with that, sports commerce. to sell merchandising and memorabilia on sports. We have a company called Dream Set Go, which does sports travel and experiences.
Mm-hmm.
We have a company, we've invested in companies like Khelo More, which aggregates sports venue bookings so that you can, when you want to play with your friends and you want to book an AstroTurf, it's easy to do, organize the match, etc.
Right,
So we also have got into esports with So Strong. And we've even got into like sports related fields like Fitter, which is for fitness, as well as Elevar, which does sports sneakers and sports equipment like bats.
right,
So the whole idea of Dream Capital is to have patient capital to grow this entire sports tech ecosystem in India and expose these younger companies to 120 million users on Dream 11 and 140 million users on our ecosystem.
right. That's very interesting. So, again, just to follow up on this, is there any area of sports where you will not go as Dream Capital? For instance, sports and education, big area. A gamification of health, another area which arguably again can leverage sports. So, are these all sort of open canvases for you?
Yes, absolutely. Look, our vision is just make sports better.
Right,
That's it, right? So for Dream Sports, anything that makes sports better, whether it be for the league, for the team, for the players, the
mhm,
athletes, or for the fans,
right.
is all fair game for us. So anything that can make sports better, we're interested in investing in.
So let's talk about a few use cases of making sports better in the larger context of sports tech more generally. Let's start with training
Yeah,
and data analytics. So major area where sports tech will come into play. We now have, for instance, full body motion capturing systems that
yeah,
allow coaches and athletes to understand minute nuances of movements and break down biomechanics in sports.
yeah.
When can we see this deployed to improve sporting performance in India more widely? Do you think that this will help us achieve some of our goals for the Olympics and sports beyond cricket? Uh, just how do you see this playing out in the Indian ecosystem?
I think we need entrepreneurs who will step up and put a few years into it and show product market fit. And
Mhm.
then companies like Dream Sports can come and fund them to grow them and scale them. But I think, look, our vision has been very clear. We're not in it to build everything. We can't and we won't, right? We're here to support entrepreneurs. And so we're always on the lookout for entrepreneurs, and these areas would be extremely interesting. And there are a couple of companies in India that have already been doing this for a couple of years. And
Right.
so as they get a little more product market fit, and we find them to be companies that can scale up, we would be happily be the first check to come in and fund them with patient capital and really let them grow.
Well, you'd have got a lot of people excited with this sort of mission statement
So
today.
we get a lot of applications from very, very early stage startups, right? And we have to help them understand that we're here to advise and mentor, but they have to get to product market fit,
Mhm.
right? It's like everybody knows that there's a future, right? That
So,
biomechanics
Harsh,
is,
how do you narrow in on that fit? I mean, what is your threshold for thinking of something as a product market fit? Because that's a subjective. Uh,
yeah, no, it's for sure subjective. I think like in B2C, let me tell you, the organic retention of paying customers, right?
mhm. Right.
For me is product market fit, right?
Mhm.
So even if you have 1,000 customers, but you can see over a year that that's steadily growing organically. It has a
Mm.
viral coefficient of more than one. So it's growing, and the people who come stay and stickiness is high. That
Right.
is actually product market fit for me. It's
Mm.
not whether your business model works or not. It's not whether, all of that is too early.
Mm.
Stickiness and usage of the platform organically, where you don't have to incentivize users with like freebies, discount coupons, bonuses to actually use your product. For me, that's
Mhm.
product market fit.
So tell me something. There is this again sports tech related debate around
Sure.
recurring revenue,
Yeah.
right? And where do you stand on that? And for the audience, you now have bikes like Peloton and other so many other sports technology products, even watches, that require you to, beyond purchase of the product, also purchase some element of the software or data analytics that you can be you know that you can leverage once you have that product, or training videos or whatever. And there's a big uptick in subscription revenues for sports tech product companies over the course of COVID. But now people expect a slight correction, as people also have an expectation that once you buy a product, you should get everything bundled
Yeah.
and pre-subscribed. Where do you stand on this debate?
I think it's fine. I think it's great to have hardware being subsidized in a huge way so that people can build software revenues on the recurring revenue side, right?
Right.
I think it's also up to the users if they want to stop and start and stop at any point of time. So for me, it reduces the hurdle drastically for trying
Yeah.
something. Now, if a Peloton bike is $1,000 and
Hmm.
then free to use for a year, right? It just everything comes baked in versus $200 in the US, right? I'm just giving a random example.
Yeah.
But you have to pay about like $70 a month or $60 a month. It's the same revenue for the company,
Right.
but it makes it so much easier for me to spend $200, buy it, try it out for a
Mhm.
few months. If I like it, keep going. And if I don't like it, stop. So I think the recurring revenues allow the companies that are
Mhm.
confident in their products and services to subsidize the hardware and costs to make it almost like free to start off with.
And in
And
fact, this has been happening in gaming.
yeah,
I mean,
I mean
with
this
the
is happening even
consoles.
even with Geo, no?
Yeah.
Even with like the phones are like marginally cost, because
Yeah.
the whole point is that once you have the hardware, you can make money off the users that are actually using that if they like the product. Geo's revolutionized the entire Indian tech landscape.
Mm.
With the whole point is to give people really low, um, charges, but keep them in high stickiness and high engagement, and then they become your loyal customers for life.
Just on that point, do you think that again, in terms of charges, the Indian context, again, moving away from personal to
Sure.
slightly more mainstream, when you talk about access to data analytics, I mean, is there a possibility, and I maybe sort of abstracting for sake of getting to the truth, is there a possibility that we have a kind of a sports tech divide between nations and teams and brands that have access to better sports tech than others, and therefore unlock better sporting performance?
I think that sports tech in general is not that expensive.
Hmm.
There might be some parts, like for example, some rehab,
Yeah.
for some physio things that EPL does that ISL might not be able to have, right? Like the enormous amounts of money spent on rehab and taking care of. I'm just giving an example of like the top league in
Yeah.
the world and the
Yeah.
top Indian league today. But for example, IPL spends a ton of money on all this. But in terms of when I say ton of money as a percentage of spends,
Still small.
it's nothing, right?
Right.
So I think that the amount of money spent on sports tech and sports metrics and analytics and all of that is so tiny compared to the overall cost of things, that there won't be any real like advantage to large teams, to like the US team versus the India team in the same sport. Of course, there will be an advantage of an IPL team
Right.
versus the local club team.
Sure. No, it's all, I mean, as long as within the
It's all
relative parameters you
yes,
can
exactly.
maintain equality, it's fine. But just that also sparks another thought in terms of, again, big brands, even big leagues, and the willingness to spend on fan engagement. I mean, what sort of sports engagement or stadium experience technologies do you think will become big in India? We've seen so much that the NBA, for instance, has done over the course of COVID. You literally, maybe just when things are normal, you may not even want to go back to the stadium, given how immersive things are, and you can like see yourself on the screen as the players are dunking, and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. So, um, So, just willingness to spend on fan engagement in India, which direction do you think it will take? Um,
Yeah, I think, India's always been a little bogged down by fans' willingness to spend.
mhm,
Willingness to pay has always been a limiting factor for Indian sports tech companies because in the US, people actually pay for stuff, right?
mhm.
In India, a whole philosophy has been show me ads, right?
Right.
But make it free.
Mm,
So I think that's been very limiting also because the ad market with our CPM rates and with our accounts receivable system in India
mm,
has never really shot up, right? I can't think of one very, very large, one of the top, none of the top companies in India in tech
mm.
are solely based on advertising revenues.
Yeah.
And so I think that now in this new generation, people are actually willing to pay. And
Mm.
that's opening up slowly. And people are not just willing to pay for general stuff, but they're willing to pay even for virtual
So,
items.
so Harsh, give me an example of that. I'm a skeptic.
Yeah, so look, I think that if you look at
Hmm.
in-app purchases almost didn't exist 5 years ago in India. And
Right.
today, in-app purchases have grown a lot in all of gaming. If you look at software, right? People are actually willing to subscribe and buy software today, which is really good. This
Mm,
may be a little bit of a tier one, but then it percolates over time, right? Before even tier one wouldn't pay.
mm.
So I think as we start growing and growing, people are willing to pay. For example, Hotstar, 3 years
Yeah.
ago, completely free, right?
Mm,
And then India was watching. And they took a very, very bold decision to switch IPL and everything to a paid. You
mm,
can't watch IPL on Hotstar if you aren't a paying subscriber today. And there's always the fear that 400 million people are watching for free, and if you make it subscription, you'll get down to 4 million people.
mm.
But they've actually crossed 40 million people.
I mean, we are passive subscribers in a sense to some what have become almost necessities in daily life, including TV, right? I mean, we subscribe, many
But,
of us.
paying 1,000 rupees now for Netflix and Hotstar and Sony Live and all of these guys, right?
Hmm.
OTT, the Indian audience is willing to spend money today.
Right.
uh, our per capita GDP has grown, our disposable income has grown, and so I think it's not like we're there. We're not even close to being there. But there's a drastic change, I think, in the last 3 to 5 years, and there will continue to be a drastic change in the next 3 to 5 years.
So just on the question of ads and freemium models,
Yeah.
again, when you look at it as an investor into this sports tech ecosystem, do you feel that it's a prerequisite to sort of draw consumers in, get them a sample of what you're offering, and then ask them to pay for the full bouquet? And just correlated to this is that we can after this perhaps get into some questions around metaverse and whether it's actually going to be the the greatest ad engine that has ever been invented, or is it going to be delight for people who are interested in quality subscriptions? And this, of course, we'll try to relate to sports sex. But first, just your thought on freemium sampling India. Is it a necessity?
I think freemium is the only way to go in India.
Hmm.
If you put a hurdle up front saying that either pay or then don't use, people won't use. But
Right.
if you give them the product for free and keep it maybe ad driven for the free users, or then you forget about the advertising and just promote the paid version, and you showcase a tremendous amount of added value by
Yeah.
going paid. I think there Indians are switching to paid, right? There's a percentage of Indians, like let's say 10%, right? That are switching to the paid version, and just given India's numbers, right?
Yeah. We have scale.
Yeah, that 10% becomes larger than some digital populations of decently sized countries in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really the way forward for everyone, right? You have to allow when it comes to sports tech, gaming, all these kind of things, right? You have to allow freemium products where the people can create stickiness, virality, and then you have a certain percentage that adopt the paid version because it gives so much better products and services.
So investees, take note. Harsh likes premium models, but is willing to stress the boundaries of sports
And you
tech.
need scale, right? There's no point of having 1 million paid users in India. Like, and that's it, right? You know, in the US, you can say, oh, I have 1 million paid customers, and
Mm,
their paying propensity is much higher. In India, the the reason why we're in India, the biggest advantage of India is the scale.
mm,
So it's better to have 100 million free customers that are using your product, spreading it virally, because you will figure out the business model over time, right? But product usage, adoption, stickiness.
mm,
I think retention is the key to any new good business. Look at WhatsApp.
mm,
WhatsApp hasn't yet figured out his business model,
mm.
right? But is it worth more than most other companies, most other products in the world? Yes.
Right. So on the very related topic of the metaverse, you know, name changes of Facebook aside,
Yeah.
you know, content owners will need to change the way they think about engagement, about broadcasts, about user experiences around sports in the metaverse, which is not a far away reality. I mean, we're seeing this play out again in some of the more traditional gaming ecosystem. One can call it the software gaming ecosystem. You know, with the likes of Fortnite, etc., streaming concerts. Now, those concerts, albeit, are not live just yet, but there are some very interesting sports technologies that are going to enable people to stream, say, live events. You could be in a Grand Theft Auto, you sit down, you know, in a lounge and you watch a live match.
Yeah.
So, you know, how do you see, you know, what is the kind of metaverse vision as far as sports tech is concerned? And the corollary to that question is someone's asked in, from the audience is, you know, what are the challenges of AR adoption as you see it in the Indian context?
So I'll take those two questions separately. I think on the metaverse, nobody knows, honestly. It's up to entrepreneurs to help keep adapting and pivoting and trying different things. But for me, one very important thing is like leagues, teams, players, right? All of them in the sports ecosystem. Earlier, the entire revenue model for them was focused on ticket sales and some endorsements on the on the jerseys and sponsorships, right?
Hmm.
Then came media rights, right? This is like 20 years ago that maybe media rights really started. Like that 1995 was the first time I think the BCCI got some big sponsors, right? For the TV rights. Media rights took over. Today, media rights are 90% revenue for all the big teams.
Correct.
I think the metaverse can play a similar role where the metaverse is creating free value, right? In terms of IP that the leagues, the teams, the players can create. If you look at NFTs,
Mm.
we've had all these magical moments in sports forever that we treasure and value and we watch on YouTube again and again, right?
Six sixes of Yuvraj Singh
Yeah.
for me.
Yuvraj's six sixes, Sachin's 100, Dada's, Lord's victory,
Dance. Yeah,
um, Joginder Sharma's catch that won the World Cup,
yeah.
Dhoni's six, World Cup
That
winning
won the
six.
World Cup.
I mean, there's so many moments over time. And now these players can actually treat them like the art that they are and sell them and make money from them. And so, this entire ecosystem is going to flourish because it's going to create art, memorabilia, merchandise. It's going to create a new IP. Teams can then interact with their fans, whether it comes to like a socios is giving fan tokens where people can actually buy tokens of a team and then get a chance to do different things with the team and be part team owners kind of thing, right? Be treated like
Right.
that. Sorare is giving you an opportunity to own player cards. You know those trump cards we used to have when we were kids and we used to
Yes.
trade, and I mean that's all digitalized now. So players can get money for the IP rights. And then you have a Dapper Labs that's taking all these moments and making that Top Shots game in NBA. Along with that, the metaverse is going to be a place where fans from across the world can come together and interact. Because I'm a Manchester United fan, I can interact with fans of Manchester United in Manchester, right?
Mm.
In the metaverse. And people don't care if I'm from India or from Manchester because my digital avatar can show whatever I wanted to show
Yeah.
and can speak whatever accent I wanted to speak, right? So it's a totally different way of, consuming with the world. And secondly, I think your question was also on AR.
Augmented reality and hardware generally
Yeah,
for sports tech and adoption
yeah,
in India.
I think
Is that going to lag behind?
AR is completely limited by two things, right? Obviously, hardware and software. So I think
Mm.
until 5G actually gets in the market and grows, AR is going to be just a fun thing. But until you have 5G in stadiums where you have 100 Mbps on your wearable device, you're never going to be able to have that AR experience that you want to have.
Right.
But that's very soon in the future, right? I think by next year we should see a big rollout of 5G.
So
And
Harsh, I'm going to hold off on my AR hardware investment until that happens.
yeah,
But we have about 4 minutes left, so I want to take
sure.
another audience question, which is
Sure.
an interesting one, and it is what can be the vision of fantasy gaming within the context of Web 3.0 metaverse world?
Yeah,
Basically, does this affect you? How
absolutely.
do you plan to leverage it? Very important question.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, in the whole metaverse and web, especially on the Web3 side of things, play to earn is now starting to, be seen, whether it's Axie Infinity or a bunch of these kind of games in the world. What we've been doing all this time is play to win. Now there's an entire new model being built around play to earn, which I think is phenomenally interesting, and we're doing our research on it.
Can you unpack that, Harsh?
It means that you don't have to stake something that you can lose, right? So if anyone's played Pokemon, you could go and collect all these Pokemon. When Pokemon was the rage, you could go and collect these Pokemon, put them into battle, and they keep gaining in value. And then the more valuable they are, the better they are on the battles. And so then, except that here, people can also buy those Pokemon for you. So
Mm,
what you can do is that you can get free players, right? And then the more you play with them in fantasy, the more they earn value and experience. And then if there's a market that's liquid enough, you can sell those to someone else who wants to buy it. And so whenever you play, you can't lose anything. You can only lose an opportunity to gain something.
mm.
And so it's a very interesting business model which removes the real money gaming element completely and makes it a play to earn, not play
That's
to win.
very interesting. I mean, the founder of Coinbase says we are moving from an internet of transactions or internet of search and discovery to an internet of information to an internet of value and ownership.
That's right.
And if you think similarly, it's a bit of an uphill task to convince policymakers,
Yeah,
regulators, civil
absolutely.
society, how this actually, is something that India can leverage, what value there is innately in it. So, I mean, as a sort of a last tidbit for the world at large, what sort of advice do you have for um, communities of people who are watching this space with intrigue but with suspicion? They feel that this tech space is evolving fast. Obviously there's some good things that they see, but there's a lot that people don't understand, and they can't be faulted for not understanding it.
Yeah.
My folks don't understand even basic digital payments. So and though a lot of decision makers are in the are in the septuagenarian sort of bracket. And so how do you get around that? How do you build more awareness around the need to engage with tech, to understand it, and to not be deeply suspicious of it? What is industry's role?
I think industry's role is to have much more interaction with the government, with the policymakers, with the bureaucrats, not when you need permissions, but before that, right?
Right.
Actually go and spend time. I think this government's done a phenomenal job of giving access, right? Historically, just to get access was impossible. I think
Mm,
here the government saying, look, we want to encourage the tech ecosystem. We want to get educated. We will do our reading. We will actually read what you send us. But I think entrepreneurs, we need to take time out to actually go sit with them, not when we have an ask, but just in terms of educating, showing, displaying the pros. Because what happens is that in today's media world, the cons are highlighted very well,
Hmm.
but the pros not so much, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the
I mean,
job.
even the media needs to be sensitized beyond the product evangelists.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, that's another ecosystem, right? What would you rather read in the newspaper today as a human being, right? As a gossip, like a scam, or would you read like a companies doing really well and having good results, right? It's just inherently we love to we like eat up slightly cynical negative news and rumors and gossip. So it's not all the media's fault. It's the consumers that tell the media what they should do more. But I think, yes, I think we all can try to push a little more positivity. And every technology, anything that's launched in the world, will always have a good and bad. The internet was a defense project,
Mobile phone.
right? Mobile, for everything can be used for good and bad. So we just have
Absolutely,
to
Harsh.
handle it.
And we're up on time, but this has been so fantastic, sort of weaving through market and policy with you. And really, from our vantage point, sitting on the other side in the policy space, just the opportunity that companies like you are trying to unlock is so fantastic. It's so great to see that we're somewhere. We're not just a dot on the global sports tech ecosystem. We're a larger circle, and you're part of that sort of circle making. So thank you for that, and thank you for sparing the time today.
Thanks, Vivan. Thanks to IMAI for setting this up.
Thank you, Mr. Jain and Mr. Sharan, for such an engaging discussion and for sharing your insights on the role and potential of sports technology. Another thank you goes out to all our attendees for putting out such interesting questions. Stay tuned for our next session. Thank you and stay safe.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Stay safe. See you.